Ricky Spencer, we're very privileged to have him come and talk to us about turtles. And he has been instrumental in the 1 million turtle campaign, and we will be finding out more about that, and particularly for the range of activities that are happening in November. So over to you, Ricky.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to give a talk about turtles, because I can certainly talk about turtles all day, every day, and happy to do so. I'm sitting in the Blue Mountains, so I'm not that far away, and which is the lands of Darug and Gundagar peoples. And in terms of turtles, we have the same turtles sitting here, and they probably make their way up and down the mountain to across Western Sydney. And Western Sydney is a real hotspot for freshwater turtles. But one of the things that we'll talk about is that we're actually starting to see, across the country, but particularly in Western Sydney, we're starting to lose our long necks because, huge amount of development, huge amount of, I guess probably to a large extent, they really don't trigger at this point anything that in terms of developers and development, because they're considered common. But what I'll show and what we'll talk about is that we're really, looking at some of our ultimate aging populations. So, because they can live such a long time. And so everyone that disappears, everyone that, that we're losing, is potentially thousands and thousands of eggs in their lifetime that are now out of the system. And we're seeing issues too with fox predation for a very long time now, reducing recruitment almost to zero in many areas in most areas of at least southeastern Australia. So I'm going to talk to you about that. I'm going to probably start the talk about talking about some common questions that we get about turtles, and go through them and talk a little bit about their basic biology, what they do, and then talk about how we need you, citizen scientists, being involved in this to not only help us work out what to do, but actually start implementing the conservation strategies through community conservation. So I'm happy for I have to keep an eye on time, but because I could keep talking forever. But please, I think at any stage, if you want to jump into it, we haven't got a huge group, so I'm happy for if you want to jump in at any stage to ask questions or put questions in the chat. And if I'm in full screen mode and I don't see them, Jasmine will jump in. Hopefully we've got some time at the end to ask specific questions, but certainly if we don't, you can really follow up and chat to us at any stage as well. So I'm just going to share my screen now. I'll just do share screen mode. This is TurtleSat, and I'll come back to that a bit later. So I am going to talk to you. I guess you're getting sort of a preview. We've got a national launch of our freshwater community conservation program called 1 Million Turtles, which I'll talk a little bit more later. All right, so what are turtles? I guess one of the questions that we get, regularly asked, is what's the difference between a turtle and a tortoise? I guess historically in Australia, so there's a few types of turtles and tortoises and terrapins in the world. We all know the sea turtle. We see at the top right-hand corner there with their big flippers or fins, and they do huge migrations around the over here, our mate over here on the left-hand side, the big Galapagos tortoise. They've got like big stumps for their feet and legs, and in between, this is our Murray shortneck, a hatchling. This is our big broadshell turtle here. They're particularly, the ones I've talked about are, Murray River turtles that you'll see. they actually have kind of that combination of, you know, not the big flipper or fin, but they actually have claws, and you can see there, yeah, but they are webbed, so you know, their feet. And so in Australia, we don't have these big tortoises, or the, you know, even the small tortoises here, which are the boxed, what they call, you know, say box turtle, box tortoise here, as in the middle here. It's one of those things, is that, you know, essentially what we have is obviously our sea turtles, and then we've got our freshwater, what we've historically called tortoises, because we don't have those land tortoises that you know, most other continents actually do. So historically we've called them tortoises, but I guess from an international recognition, probably anything aquatic we probably call turtles, whether that's a sea turtle or a freshwater turtle. But honestly, it doesn't really matter what you call them. If you've historically called them tortoises, they're tortoises to you. And so the nomenclature, the naming doesn't really matter so much. But, you know, I'll probably go on and call them freshwater turtles, because, you know, when I have to write papers, we have to call them turtles, and that sort of thing. But that, you know, many of the old literature call our freshwater turtles freshwater tortoises. All right. So what do we have? We've got essentially turtles and tortoises, as well as terrapins, which are, you know, occur in North America. They kind of, you see them in brackish water, you know, sort of in that freshwater to, you know, mangrove type area. Around the world, we have two types of freshwater turtles, and so they occur pretty much worldwide, except in the cool polar regions, because they are reptiles. They do have to warm up, and it's pretty hard to warm up in our polar regions. We have two types, and in Australia we generally see what we call the pleurodira, or the side neck turtles. So to think about that is that if you stick your arm out and pull your arm back like that, that's our side neck turtles. It's not like the cartoons, which you see they retract their heads fully in. They're the cryptides. And so they actually pull their heads right in, and to some degree that gives them, you know, at least when dealing with predators, you know, a greater advantage, because you can see our freshwater turtles here. Just this one on the right hand side has a transmitter in there on it, which we've used to sort of, you know, the traditional ecologist out there with a, you know, holding a aerial antenna, look, you know, tracking. That's it. That's what that's doing, is tracking where that turtle's going. But you can see its neck. You can actually see how it pulls it back, and and a lot of them can't actually get their necks fully in. And so when you have an introduced predator like a fox, who, you know, if you think about our dogs and that, they have a muzzle that can kind of get in to smaller spaces, they can actually become a major predator, and are a major predator of our freshwater turtles, not just the eggs which they eat. So essentially what we're seeing, and probably need to, you know, around the world we've got about 331 species of freshwater turtle, and essentially in Australia we've got about 30 of those. So it changes almost month to month when they do some DNA analysis and say, oh, that's a subspecies, or that's a new species. And so essentially we've got about 30 species of freshwater turtle in Australia. And probably the hotspots for species is the northeast New South Wales, right up to, you know, sort of the northeast of Queensland. So in some of those, you know, those southeast Queensland areas, you know, you can potentially get up to, I think, 7 or 8 different species in some of those catchments. So why don't we have, I guess this is the thing, why don't we have the land tortoises? Well, we used to have them, but they all died out. So we're largely because, you know, in terms of real dry periods, most of those tortoises, went extinct. And essentially, I guess what's serving the same kind of ecological, the same sort of ecological role now is, you know, probably our blue tongues or shinglebacks, those sort of things that that live out in those real dry areas. So we don't have those, those land tortoises. I say most of our freshwater turtles are Pleuroides, those kind of side neck turtles. They all are, except for one, which is found in some of the river systems up in the Northern Territory, which is called the Pignosed turtle, which are pretty spectacular big turtle. They're a bit different in terms, they live in the freshwater, but they've got, pretty much like the flippers, like saltwater turtles or sea turtles. So I kind of think they've kind of got lost over the evolutionary time. They're a sea turtle that got lost and went up the rivers of Papua New Guinea and Australia. So they have, but the rest of our freshwater turtles are actually these side neck turtles that you'll see. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, so that, as I said, you can see these pig-nosed turtles here, really spectacular turtles, quite large freshwater turtles as well. So turtle biology, and so we'll use some terms, and it's good to know what these terms are as well. So the top bit of the turtle shell is called the carapace. So that's, and we'll actually show you some bits of, how that shell has become so strong. It's actually, a really cool jigsaw puzzle. The bottom is the plastron. That's not as protected as the shell, because their legs come out, and if you do, although if you do see long necks, and that's the main one in the Parramatta River and most of southeastern Australia, one of the most common one. They're pretty good at pulling all their legs in and even their head in pretty well as well. So the bit that joins the plastron with the carapace, it's actually fused. Like if you think about our ribs, to our back, and those top bits to the backbone, there's what we call a join or a bridge that fuses that, between the sternum to the ribs to the backbone. It's made of bone, but it's actually covered. So you essentially have your ribs like a normal ribs that we have, pretty much the same number, I think. But essentially what's happened is essentially that's joined in, and then over the top is what we call keratin, or plates that go over the top. And keratin, the best way to think about a keratin is pretty much our fingernails and our hair. That's the proteins that's made of, and that essentially is between bones, ribs, and protein. That's essentially what we're talking about with a turtle shell, and it's really cool. I'm not going to go too much into detail. I want to talk about more of this, but this is essentially what we're looking at. This is the eastern long neck here. You can see, this is what we call scoots. There's like little bits of jigsaw puzzle of between the bone and this keratin that's being formed on the top and the bottom. But if you think about it, if you've got these little joins, essentially where they're joining, there'd be quite weak points, in terms of cave in. What they do is actually have multiple layers. So under here, so this is the top bit that we see, but underneath there, you can see that they've actually got other bits that now come over the top in terms of that to make that a really strong structure. So your joins now actually aren't your weak points, because you now have at different points, you've got essentially you've got your armour underneath that too, to make it really, really strong. And so you can see here now how it's overlapped. The different, the top bit here is the carapace. You can see the scoots, but then you've got an underlayer of scoots that actually don't meet exactly where those joins are. So it makes them really, really strong. Unfortunately, not strong enough for it, to resist a car going over the top of them. And but for any other predator or native predator, it's really hard to get into. So it is an armour that they've evolved, which is really strong, based on pretty much of bone and hair or fingernail. That's essentially layers and layers of that are on top of that. This is a broad-shelled turtle here skeleton, and so you can see the carapace, you can see the plastron, and you can see the bridge, how those are connected there. I also wanted to show this bit here. See this up near the head? We're called the hyoid apparatus. This is actually really cool to actually see this in action when you feed a turtle, and particularly these broadshells, they're really good at it. If you think about a syringe and you pull back on a syringe to draw in water, this is what this thing does. So essentially what they do is open their mouths, and big snapping turtles like in the North America, do that. And any fish or those kind of things that swim past, whoosh, pull straight back, sucks in all the water and fish that are in there, and then snap. They can get it. So that's essentially what really. If you ever see a broadshell turtle, and they've got broadshell turtles up at the reptile park, if you ever get up there, go to feeding time and watch them eat. They're really cool to watch. One thing you might know is that turtles don't actually have teeth. It's rare that you ever get bitten. You're more likely to get bitten. The only time I've been bitten once, in all the thousands of turtles that I've handled, freshwater turtles, but I've been bitten about 9 or 10 times when I worked in North America. Those cryptideers, those sliders and painted turtles and snapping turtles, that they target you. They will bite you, and they actually hurt. So even though they don't have teeth, it can actually hurt. But in Australian freshwater turtles, like I said, very rare that they will bite. And what they'll normally do is, if you walk near them, they'll pull their heads back in, and so you can move them off roads and not worry about getting bitten by them. And even when they do, they're pretty hopeless in terms of trying to get you anyway if you do happen to get a cranky one. But what they have is bony plates in there. So in their mouth there, they've got this beak, what they call a beak, and that's quite rigid. You can see there, it can could snap down, and they've got big jaw muscles and bony plates. So anything they put in there, they just crush, in terms of rather than chew or break down that way.
Ricky, there was a question around what makes a side-neck turtle unique.
What makes them unique is that but to a large extent, is they are very different to those cartoons that you do see. Remember the old cartoons where they have a turtle and they pull their heads in and that they can't actually do that. They often have much longer necks than the other types of freshwater turtles. So the ones that they essentially are right out, and they pull them out, pull them back in like so. And often that, I guess, with some of the species, how they evolved that way, I think potentially that reflex of able to go bang like that, it might actually be a really good way to actually eat fish and catch fish that way. Some are pretty hopeless at it, but others are actually really good at it. So, but potentially those with a really long neck can, ambush predators by kind of sitting there and just going bang, like so. So that's probably where one advantage is that they can sit there and catch fish that way. But like I said, it depends on the species. Some are built for more scavenging and rather than actually catching fish. I'll jump onto reproduction, because now we sort of get to the point where you start seeing turtles, where you potentially and what they're doing. And it's often around nesting. And so what are they trying to do? So I get a lot of questions about, do they look after the eggs? Do they come out? So what they actually do is essentially most of them will mate in autumn and spring in the water, and then they'll actually produce lots and lots of eggs. And so this time of year, and we're really coming into the right time of year where turtles start nesting. So some of them will have like 30 odd eggs in them, and that they've produced. And essentially what they're doing, so all species lay eggs. There's all but one lay eggs on land. So they come out and they generally walk to the highest point, from the water. Some might go wandering a bit further, but they're looking for the high points. Does anyone know why they might be looking for the high points? I'm happy for you to jump in. unmute. And why would they be coming out and looking to go up the hill and nest in those high points? And Graham Stockfield, you cannot answer that question, please. Graham here he's the president of Turtles Australia, so I might get him to talk a bit later on and answer some questions, but you can't answer this question now, Graham.
So one of the answers is to avoid flooding. Yeah, so there's a couple people going flooding.
Yeah, that's it. So it's a variable time of year, particularly for water. We can get some really big rain events which trigger them to nest and actually start coming out, but that can actually lead to flooding events, those kind of things. So they've evolved to actually go to the highest point and actually drop and actually dig a nest and produce and drop their eggs in there. There is one turtle in the Northern Territory that'll actually, it times it to actually lay construct a nest and lay their eggs in the water. And the eggs won't develop until those water levels, and it's very predictable, don't forget, up in the Northern Territory, you've got your wet and dry seasons. They'll actually wait, they'll do it at the time that it's actually dropping. And then essentially, what they've done is all right, if I lay my eggs and construct a nest underwater, it's going to be much harder for those terrestrial predators to actually find it, and we'll just wait. We'll actually just wait until the water drops, and then they'll start developing at that point. So, but most, all other Australian turtles will come up and lay their eggs on land. The frequency of reproduction. So in most cases, most freshwater turtles will have a clutch every year, but some of them, particularly in these kind of, as you go further north, might have lots and lots of smaller clutches. So instead of the one big 30 eggs of 30 in a clutch, they might have 3 clutches of 10 or something like that. And so essentially what they do, and you can sort of see here, is a couple of turtle eggs and hatch. They'll lie underground for anywhere between, well, look, with some species, for most of them, for a lot of them, it'll be a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, and then they'll come out, emerge, and then head to water. Some of them more than 12 months, and I think we're starting to see some evidence that it might be out to 2 years. Sometimes they're under the nest, in the nest for. But yeah, that's it. Yeah, and even the common long neck that we're seeing, particularly more south that we're seing, can overwinter within the nest. So they might nest this time of year, take about 3 months to hatch. But if autumn comes, with a cold snap, particularly south, they might be, they might have to stay in there until the following spring or more. Okay, so just some general information. What you'll find is you can see in this case, these are our short neck turtles. And we've got on the left-hand side, you can see you've got a male, and you can tell by that is that you've got a very long tail. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the female, much smaller tail. Generally, females are bigger than males, and they'll grow to a bigger size. But as they're different ages, they can be the same size. But this is how we tell it, at least with short necks. Long necks, very difficult at all to tell the difference. You don't see this tail difference, and you often don't really see their tail at all because they've pulled it right in. So it is very difficult to tell the difference. Most members of the public probably couldn't tell the difference between a male and female, unless you caught a big girl that was out nesting and she's much bigger than, she's probably getting out to this size out here, because long necks are smaller than the short necks, and the males are much smaller. I often say when there's a couple of species that we'll see in the Sydney region, mainly the long necks, but we will still see these short necks. There's a bit of debate whether those short necks are native. The genetics says they're probably not, but there is certainly some debate about that. But they're here, so we want to record them. We want to know about them. as well. So they're very different in size, and they do look very, very different. And I'll show you some of the photos there as well. Now, this is, so in terms of reproduction, generally smaller than male. The males are generally smaller than females in most cases, longer tails. They do have what we call internal fertilization. So they will, like I said, in autumn, mate in autumn as well as spring as well. So you can often see them, you know, sort of the males courting the females as well. And so this is where we're now at a point where we start seeing turtles as a public to a large extent. So they come out to nest, they construct their nests with their hind limbs. So their back legs are actually almost like hands, and they pull out the soil, and they actually construct like a boot-shaped nest, drop their 20 or 30 eggs, or 10 to 30 eggs. And instead of throwing all that soil back into the nest, they essentially will cover it up, and they'll create what we call almost like a nest plug. So these eggs, and it's really, really important, these eggs are actually surrounded by air, not soil, because eggs actually breathe. They've got holes in their shell where carbon dioxide comes out and oxygen comes in. So if you're surrounded by soil, wet soil, you're going to asphyxiate, and that's one of the major problems. And this is why they come to the highest point, is that they need to get to a point where they've got air between the eggs, so that they can nest, so that they can breathe in the nest. The nest plug and how they actually construct that is actually pretty cool. So that they'll construct that, make sure that there's no soil between all the eggs. They'll actually raise themselves up, and they go bang and hit it down, and a few hours after they've finished and left, you can't find it. They do such a really good job in finding it. So usually to find a nest that hasn't been dug up by a predator, you have to sit there and watch it. It's rare that you'll actually find a nest walking in to get it. So in the Parramatta River, we've essentially got two species. We've got the common longneck, which everyone knows and loves, and probably has a story about encounters with longnecks. We also have, I guess, the Sydney turtle, but essentially the equivalent to the Murray River turtle, which is the short-necked turtle here. This one's much bigger. So the bottom one here is generally much bigger than what the long necks are, and you can see the difference in the shape of their heads too, and their necks. It's got a much shorter neck, the short-necked turtle, of course, but the long neck here you can see is much more slender neck, and but longer, much longer as well. Oops. And okay, so a little bit about both of them. So the long neck that we see are carnivorous. It's anything that it can catch. It loves bugs. It moves around a lot, and it will go from permanent water out to the temporary water. If there's a bit of rain and a little bit of puddle, a bit more than a puddle, but a little bit of rain, that sparks to life a lot of the shrimp and that sort of thing. They'll get out and get in there, and you can find stomach contents that are just full of new shrimp and bugs and that sort of thing. They also are carnivorous, so they will eat anything. So if you've got long necks at home, pretty much you're feeding them fish and or cubes of meat and that sort of thing, and they're essentially or the commercial frozen cubes largely full of meat and seafood and that sort of thing. They nest early summer. They probably have a bit more than 10 eggs per clutch. You can get some of the big girls out to sort of 16 or more, but that now is the time that they nest. So it's really coming into that point. They nest a little bit. What you generally find is that they will start nesting a little bit later than what these short necks will be doing. And these short necks are omnivorous. So they'll obviously love to eat meat as well, but they're not that good at catching fish and other things. So they'll eat lots of plants, lots of algae, But both of these turtles, anything that dies, any fish kills, those kind of things, they're in there. They're the ones, they're the vacuums of the river doing it. Up in sort of at this region, they can have probably about 20 odd per clutch. They may have a couple of clutches in terms of eggs, 20 eggs per clutch. Down on Murray, we get 30 plus as well. They really need the permanent water. So you don't see these ones out of water so much. You do see them, where you do see them is largely, basking. And we've got some videos, hopefully, that will we have time to show. This is one. I don't think I shared with audio, but it doesn't really need it. So ecologically, they are the vacuums of the river. Really, really important in that carrion cleanup. This here, this photo here is not of our native turtles, but this is a carp. And these are snapping turtles that you may have heard of in North America. But around the world, our turtles actually do the same thing as what these do. You put a carp in there, and I'm going to play this video. Hopefully it works for you. These are some of the work that we've done out at Western Sydney. So where we put them, you can see the carp with turtles within a few days, cleaned up. Without turtles, not much happening. You wait till you get to day 30 with that carp, which has now exploded, and in terms of water quality, you can see why turtles are really important. That you can see here, this turtle going in there, they clean it up really quickly. They clean it up to a point where it doesn't decay. It doesn't decay in the water and cause those water quality issues. So they're actually really important for that role, and we're losing them. We're losing the vacuums out of the system. Culturally, they're actually really important. They're a totem species for many Indigenous groups as well. We've worked with Yorta down on the Murray, and their totem species is the broadshell. So culturally, actually very, very important to communities, but also have been an important food source. But also the pet trade. It's very big in the pet trade, freshwater turtles. You can see differences in prices here, just up here, but it actually has been the cause of declines of and extinctions of freshwater turtles throughout Asia. Very lucrative, and poaching is certainly a big issue. But it certainly is an important food source as well. So these are some of the farms that you can see in Asia. And it's been a really important food source, for many centuries as well. Okay, so the problem we see is in Australia, we don't have so much the poaching issues, but I just wanted to kind of give you I guess way back in 1983, Mike Thompson was my PhD supervisor, but while he was doing his PhD, did the first report of predation by foxes might actually be a problem, and he was finding huge amount of nest predation. He also predicted because of these aging populations, about 10 years later, that it would take about 20 to 30 years to start seeing declines of freshwater turtles. About that time, nearly 20 years, Bruce Chessman found that there was about between 70 and 90% of declines that from his 30 years previous, where he was studying in the Murray River. 30 years, about the same time Mike was doing that, he went back to his populations, which he's been going back to, and estimated those short necks and the long necks, and the long necks particularly had declined by about 91% in his population. So the common long neck we're starting to see is actually becoming not so common. or not so common to the point in that we're only seeing really aging populations or just adults that are actually in there. Now, what we're seeing is that's not quite right in terms of only affecting 2 species. This is the only 2 species that we've really been looking at long term, particularly these common species as well. What we saw too is a huge, I guess, really disaster in 2015. So if anyone knows where the Bellinger River is, up near Coffs Harbour, we saw a disease event that was pretty much an extinction event. And I'll just jump on here. This is just to sort of show you, that it's been predicted for a long time. On the left-hand side is that original paper that Mike produced back in 1983. And essentially, this is where we're starting to see, 20, 30 years later. But what I'll come back to the Bellinger, sorry, but I just want to kind of show you that this is what we're seeing and what we're starting to see, across the country for our freshwater turtles. Multiple threats, which I'll talk about, from road mortality to disease. This one up here in the left and the right-hand side, just that's the Murray short-necked turtles. See that stuff caked on them? That's actually essentially, that is a marine tube worm. So salinity became such a problem during the drought before, the Millennium Drought, that tens of thousands of these turtles were caked with marine tube worms. So a freshwater species being caked with, a saltwater species, there were great community groups that were actually bringing them in, scrubbing them all down. But there were tens of thousands that were actually lost because of this. It's almost like coral that's there. We have massive issues of fox predation. So it's hard to believe, but in most years in southeastern Australia, in most populations, we're seeing pretty much 100% nest predation. So no juvenile recruitment at all. Some years we're seeing it, some years, but most years we're not seeing any recruitment at all. And this here, we talk about disease. This is the Bellinger River snapping turtles. This disease went a virus that wiped out pretty much all the adults in the population. You can see they became weak, lethargic, blind from it. We don't know exactly what caused it, but there are potentially things around water quality, novel diseases, those kind of things, or potentially releases of pet animals with diseases, a whole range of different factors with it. So what we're seeing really is, I guess, a multifactorial problem. Foxes, carp, affect water quality, water management issues in terms of lack of water, which we've seen in the Murray-Darling, those kind of things all affect freshwater turtles. The big ones, and particularly in Western Sydney, are development, where we're losing our wetlands, motor vehicle accident as well. Is certainly a big one. Along the Murray-Darling, those kind of things, there are other aspects that pesticides can actually, kill their food supply. They can accumulate pesticides as well. Fishing is certainly an issue as well. So, historically and even now, it's pretty gruesome, but there was a newspaper article in the late 1800s and 1900s that, basically turtles were in the Murray River were actually a pest species, and what you should do is, when you catch them because they're on your line, cut their heads off and throw them out. So we still see some of that occurring in fishing areas now as well. Salinity, as I showed you here, and things that affect their reed beds. Like I said, these short-necked turtles, this is all they eat. They'll eat this until something good comes along, like a dead fish or something like that. But they rely on these things like ribbonweed for it. This is the Bellinger River snapping turtle. And so I'm not going to talk massive amount of it, but I've also briefly talked about it. But we're involved in the recovery of this species, which is going on right now. So as I said, most of the adults died. We went in and we found only 3 water holes that had turtles that did not have the disease. And they were pulled out and taken. We quarantined them at Western Sydney for University for a year, and now they're breeding and producing hatchlings at Taronga. And another group is of juveniles, because the juveniles survived. And obviously weren't too many juveniles in there, but a group of those juveniles are now at Symbio Wildlife Park now, almost getting to the stage of getting to reproduce as well. But I guess one thing I'm obviously mindful of time and going to take it right there, is that what you can do and how you can be involved. And we need your help, because this photo here is actually one of the simple act of moving a turtle off the road is actually one of the most profound and impactful conservation actions for any species in the world. A conservation action for any species in the world, we see rewilding and all that kind of thing. This action here has the most impact probably in terms of conservation and saving a species than any other conservation thing that we could actually do. The reason why is that these turtles live for about 100 years, 75 to 100 years. We don't exactly know, but we know there are ones out there that are 75 years old, that they've been handed down from generation to generation. And we know from watching the growth rates of them in the wild that they take 10 to 15 years to mature, and so these guys can live for about 100 years and essentially produce eggs every year. So if you think about it, producing 20 odd eggs, 15, 20 odd eggs for 100 years, that's thousands and thousands of potential hatchlings that just from one individual as such. So people are concerned for this helpless turtle, but this one small action is potentially saving thousands over her lifetime of hatchling turtles. But this image raises a lot of issues. This is actually potentially dangerous. You don't really want to do this on a highway. And what if and how do we stop turtles going on the road in the first place? They're the kind of things that we need to start considering, and designing highways that way and roads that way as well. The other question is, how do I pick up a turtle? A lot of people ask those types of questions. Will it bite me? We've talked about that earlier. No, this turtle won't bite you, and don't worry about that. And even if they do, little long necks don't have big jaws, and they'll just hold on to you. So, but they don't bite. They usually just have their heads in. These are all valid questions and all quite difficult to answer without the right information. And that's where we're really coming in, because we recognize how important this action actually is. These and other actions that in terms of what people can actually do, and it's far easier, far cheaper to actually implement an action like this than to set up breeding colonies or fenced off areas, those kind of things. We can actually have a huge impact by actually doing that. So in 2015, we started a small citizen science project called TurtleSat, which is Turtle Survey and Analysis Tools. Essentially, it was it's mapping where people saw turtles and nests, which will actually help us identify those road mortality hotspots, where turtles are nesting, nest predation rates potentially, and early indicators of disease. So if we actually because people can upload photos, we can actually start seeing those early indicators of disease. Why it works is that data are pretty easy for people to collect. Everyone knows what a turtle looks like. Bingo. It's easier than identify between certain species of mammals, those kind of things. Everyone knows what a turtle is. That's a turtle. It's a big dome-shaped thing, and nothing else looks like it. And through what we call mobile, through apps, and I guess back in 2014, 15, this is kind of it was still apps, but it was right at the start of those kind of things where we can. Everybody now has a computer, a GPS, and a camera in their back pockets, and that's where we sort of came from this. That we can one, identify from the photo. People, their GPS is in their phone. We know where they are, and we can see what they're seeing, and that and that across the whole of Australia, it can be really powerful in terms of what we're looking at. We also I guess, some of the things that we found out is that, the media love to talk about turtles too, and everyone loves a turtle, so we can actually promote it quite well. And most importantly, was actually connecting with community groups and local champions, which many of them in the room here tonight. So, which was really good, providing that tool and an ability to harness that data for good, and actually implement strategies that we are now getting to the point where we've got enough data to actually start looking at implementing some of those strategies to things. We've been identifying road hotspots, and we're now working with like Transport for New South Wales, particularly with the new highways to the airport, about putting them in the right spots, albeit those road mitigation strategies as well. So lots.
Ricky, can I just? There was like, is it possible to have tunnels, or Sydney Olympic Park has some tunnels? Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know about Sydney Olympic Park. I think there were some that were put in for frogs, but anything can use that too. Anything aquatic could absolutely use that. And there are different strategies. One of the things about turtles, though, is that they're pretty easy to kind of almost train. They walk to the highest point, and that's a big problem, is because our roads around wetlands are usually the highest point. But if you actually just put a small little barrier, they'll walk along it and they can drop in. We're working with turtles, a relatively new community group called Turtles Albury Wodonga, where they contacted us because the new highway was actually causing huge amount of mortality that went through. And we came up with strategies to actually, because they were walking up the hill, that you could actually put in a little drift fence, or a little fence that, it doesn't have to be a big fence, it only has to be about that big, that guided them down to, an underpass that was down there, which is like a creek line and that sort of thing. So the thing is that, and what this has kind of done with some of the TurtleSat stuff now is actually put it on the radar of things like the RTAs and that kind of thing, that they're actually now starting to think about it, because it's actually quite easy to, direct turtles elsewhere and keep them off the roads. But we, I guess prior to this is that, people probably knew where the hotspots were, but now we actually got some data that we can actually say, hey, look, you've got 14, over that one night you had 14 turtles, killed because of nesting. With that, out on Londonderry Road and Castlereagh Road, we had that, quite recently, 14 turtles, all within a kilometre spot. And that's where they started talking and started, okay, how do we do this, and that sort of thing. So that's where it's not actually that hard to actually stop turtles from doing it. The one thing, this is TurtleSat. It's in less than a week. It's going to look actually very, very different. It's got new apps and those sort of things coming, and we've got a launch of what we call our 1 Million Turtles project. But the beauty of TurtleSat is, it's pretty simple. We've had some issues with, obviously an old app, new phones, those kind of things, and that's why we need to do the upgrades, so that people don't get frustrated because it not working on different devices and that sort of thing. So we're now at that point, and so the TurtleSat app will look very, very different in about a week's time. But the same functionality, essentially what it's actually doing is, in your location, it'll pretty much bring up to a large extent the species that should be present. And then you can actually identify it. You can look at an image to help if you didn't know what it was, and just record what you see. And but also nests. These are the things that we can start seeing. This is, and Graham here knows this side up here, just up in the top left-hand corner here, up here. This is probably one of the first years we used TurtleSat, and all this data up here. Can you see that? Just follow they're all depredated nests that have been destroyed by foxes. Those orange ones, and all of that data, I'm pretty sure Graham recorded all of that into there. But the thing that you can see here is that there are turtle shells, and they see the green and the blue with the X across them. These were these were turtles that were killed by foxes, as they were probably intercepted by foxes as they came out to nest. So you can see all the, in terms of the damage that foxes are doing, just in terms of nests, but also in terms of killing females as well. But just down in the bottom right here, so it doesn't stop just with after nesting. Over the next few months, you can actually find eggshells. If you find eggshells on the ground, that's a turtle nest. That's a dug up turtle nest. So it could be a water dragon in some areas, but basically what you're finding in most areas you're walking around will be a turtle nest and with eggshells. You can record that into TurtleSat. And probably I guess I wouldn't say most important, but obviously where we are finding road mortality, it's really critical to actually record that, because then it mightn't just be one turtle. You're seeing it as you drive past, but like I said, there were 14 over a 24-hour period in one area that were recorded. So it's not just that one turtle. Someone else might see, just behind you, see an hour or two later, see another one, and that becomes a hot spot.
Ricky, there's people saying, like, would it be great to have registered road signs in hot spots when it's wet, maybe? They were talking about, yeah,
absolutely. And this is what, for some of the small things we've been able to do, which have a big impact, is that communities been able to use this data to go to their RTAs and actually, request, turtle crossing signs and those kind of things as well. So that absolutely, those kind of things can, from the data that's already there, feel free. Like, I'll show you a bit. I'll show you some particularly around Parramatta River and that catchment. You can use that data to actually go to your RTA and say, look, we've got a problem. Those kind of things that we can look at. The other way to see turtles is basking, and this is a colleague, James Van Dyke, who's created. Hopefully this will work.
I'll just say that you've got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah. I'll just quickly show you. If you can walk around your wetland, you may see this.
Shy baskers most of the time.
Turtles basking.
So you won't often see them basking like this.
You've got to get out. You've got to sneak up on them. And this is what it's a good way to actually, test using TurtleSat. Go to your local wetland and see if you can actually walk around and find a turtle basking. So
especially since
I will just stop there. You can see that. You can see that a bit on the website, because I will just move on.
There's a question about dewatered dams, and are you working with them?
Yeah. Turtle Rescue New South Wales do a wonderful job, particularly out, a bit further out than the Parramatta River catchment, but that expanding northwest and southwest area we've been working with Shane and Kane from Turtle Rescue New South Wales for a long time to actually gather that data. How many turtles are actually in there? How many wetlands are being lost? And we've actually between 2010 and 2017, the Blacktown area had 25% loss of their wetlands because of development. Other areas, and that's such a small, relatively small period, but overall throughout Western Sydney, and particularly Liverpool area, those sort of areas, huge amount. And the people on the ground are the volunteers, like Turtle Rescue New South Wales, going in and taking those turtles out and relocating them. So if you think about 25% loss of wetlands in kind of a 7-year period, it's a huge amount. And look, we need to do better with that. Our wetlands are actually doing what we call green infrastructure, doing a really good job for for water quality, but for heat cooling as well. So they absorb a lot of that heat. So we need to be able to value our what is the value of that wetland versus putting up a McMansion with with a black roof, which thank goodness that there's been some sense that you can't actually have black tile. These new developments can't have black tiles anymore, but that's a different story going forward. But what I want to do, I will kind of finish here, and I know we've got a few minutes, but we and you can see this video. I won't show you. We have. I'll just go to the end. Can't do it without. I will just go to the end, so we can maybe have a couple of minutes of questions. I know we have a launch event coming up for this 1 Million Turtles project, because you know what, we're doing a whole suite of other things other than just recording turtles. We want you to be involved in community conservation. Come back to Graham, like he's been leading the charge of just simple things like creating nest protectors to put over nests when you do see one. It's one thing to record, but now we can actually we can teach and train to actually do some really cool conservation actions. That conservation action of just taking the turtle off the road, like I said, it's really, really important. We are launching a whole range of things in terms of things like turtle islands, and we launched one a couple of years ago, which is still in the research phase. We're still developing it up in the Blue Mountains, but there's a bunch that we're actually starting across the country now, and we want to do more. And we actually want to. So go to 1millionturtles.com. We do have the national launch of this, and we'll talk more about that on November 1st, because we're launching Turtle Month too. We call November Turtle Month because that's when most turtles, at least in this area and most of Southeast Australia, are actually nesting as well. So please join us there. It'd be really good, and can talk more about those actions. I did want to. I did have TurtleSat ready to go for the Parramatta River catchment to show you, but I know it's 8 o'clock. If you want to have a few questions, happy to take some more questions and while at the same time I'll actually zoom in on TurtleSat and show you kind of the recordings in this region. So any more questions?
You can unmute yourselves if you'd like.
Please.
There's been lots of discussion on chat about finding a turtle in Toongabbie today and such like. So we'll copy that for you.
Can you put it in TurtleSat for us? Because you can actually go back. It's not just the app. You can go to turtlesat.org.au on the computer or on the phone, and you can put historical recordings back into TurtleSat. So if you've got one now, go and do it now, and it'll actually pop up on the map straight away, I think. But we really don't have time to see that. But I just quickly.
And Jeffrey has raised his hand. Can you speak?
Yeah.
Yes. I have often taken a turtle off the road.
Yep.
Which is great. But what I've normally done then is to take it, if there's a creek running near the road, I take it down to the creek.
Yep.
You'll see they'll tend to go up to the high ground. So,
well, there's what we generally say is, particularly out in the country, you probably just move it across the road in the direction it was heading.
Yeah.
But we're in more that built-up area. It's a little bit more difficult. Potentially it might still put it into risk in a risk area. What you did, the nearest creek or whatever that because they're probably going to be near a wetland. Put it exactly where you did, probably still in the direction that it was heading.
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's definitely the safest option to do. Move it off the road, move it to an area. But if it's crossing the road and you can just put it 5 or 10 meters just off that road in the direction it was heading, and you still think that's pretty safe, there's not another road that it might go into, just do that. Just move it off the road.
Yeah, I mean, it's normally been on a country road, so there's not normally another road nearby in these cases.
Your best bet is just to pick it up and put it 5 or 10 meters off the road in the direction it was heading.
Yep, thanks.
And Jules, do you want to say something about a dead turtle?
Yeah.
records.
Oh yeah, I was just asking. Clearly, it's worthwhile recording dead turtles as well, but I've found just left carapace and bones. Is that still worth a report?
Yeah, look, absolutely. There's questions, in the survey that you can answer within that. So you might know, what you might even know what species is sometimes because they're so old, the carapace and that sort of thing. Report it. Just at least where we're finding dead turtles is actually really important. The X's here, these are the green icons here are long necks. The X's are dead turtles. So you look at like the Northern Road, huge amount, and that's just you zoom in there, you've got a lot more that are in there. The blue here, and this is interesting, the blue here are your short neck turtles. What that is if it doesn't have an X, it's a live turtle. It's probably seen basking or nesting or that sort of thing. But you potentially do see some on the roads up here. The other thing is that the gold, and we haven't got too many nests that we're seeing down here, where you have the P. That means predated nest. So what we are looking for is that it doesn't stop just with the nesting. If you find eagles, we're working, and the other thing too is that we're working with with partners within here, including if you go to 1millionturtles.com, we're going to have things like Turtles in the Schools program. We're working with one school PLC golf courses. So Oatlands Golf Course we're working with to look at, because turtles are nesting in the bunkers and that sort of thing. Actually, let's start utilizing things like golf courses, particularly as urban green spaces, which are hard to find, might actually be a really good sanctuary for our lots and be able to release hatchlings and protect nests in those kind of areas. So yeah, we're absolutely doing working with partners and looking for more partners and looking for more more things in where are nesting. Do you see like those old ones you might think about, oh, it's a dead turtle, I won't record it. Please record anything like that. We need to know where they are and where the where they're being impacted by cars and foxes and dogs and a whole range of different things.
And Ricky, what about red-eared slider turtles?
Yeah, I haven't talked too much about. Well, I haven't talked about them at all. They are potentially a problem in urban areas, and so just taking it back, a red-eared slider turtle is from North America. They're the ones that pull their heads in. They look very, very different to our Australian turtles because they actually have like stripy red and yellow colorations on their heads, so you can easily identify them. The other thing, particularly what red-eared sliders and North American turtles, they're called your true basking turtles. So you might find them basking any time of the year, out basking. So I showed you a little bit of the video of those turtles basking down at Albury. They're all short necks and probably some long necks. But in these urban areas, these sliders were sold as pets in the 70s as little penny turtles. And I think one thing, they haven't established a huge amount, like compared to what they are. They're one of the top 100 pest species in the world. In Asia, with the poaching of freshwater turtles, of the native ones, they've been replaced by sliders, which have been sold as pet turtles as well. We don't see them as much, and I think there's a couple of reasons. One, we stopped selling them, in the 70s pretty quickly. And the other thing is that I think the factors that are causing our turtles to go extinct are probably affecting them as well, like nest predation and that sort of thing. So they haven't quite established, but we don't want them to establish. So if you see them, there's one, you can contact us if you're not sure. So you can put a sighting in TurtleSat or send us a photo. But there is standard, there are standard protocols in terms of contacting DPI. There's a hotline for invasive pests and sliders in terms of for that. At the very least, if you record it into TurtleSat, we know where it is exactly. We can help you identify it. But the number one priority is to call DPI and let them know that there is a potential slider in there, because if we know they're actually not that hard to catch and get them out there. Unless they're in, if they start and eradicate them, not just manage them, they can actually stop them and remove them. So red-eared sliders are the ones you really only you only want to see two types of freshwater turtle in the Parramatta River catchment. That's the long neck, which is the main one you'll see, and potentially the native Australian short neck that are in there as well. Anything else?
We have a question about what do we do if we find baby turtles or exposed eggs?
Yeah. So the best thing to do potentially, if you've got exposed eggs, cover it up and put a nest protector over it. And it's really not that hard. And Graham, Turtles Australia, which we'll have a link to, and make some wonderful nest protectors. So they're basically, that green kind of wire lattice that you can get backyard from Bunnings, those rolls, those green things. You can make them out of that and tent stakes. And Graham's shown, for temporary, you can put some bricks over the top so the predators don't get it while you go down to Bunnings and grab some wire mesh. Because the beauty of that wire mesh, it's really thick. You can set and forget, because the hatchlings can get out because they're small enough to get out. What I'd say, if there are hatchling turtles coming out, I would generally say leave them. They know where they're going. They're probably nearer, the nest will be near the water. You can probably watch them, probably go. If they are exposed, potentially moving them to the water. Or if you're worried and don't want to do it, call Wires or call the local. They'll come down and help with that as well.
And are Wires the people to call when you have an injured turtle, or is there someone else?
No, the best thing is to potentially call Wires. Depends obviously how injured he is. Often if they're been run over, they can still be alive and cracked, and you really don't want to move them too far because they'll fall apart. Those shell will fall apart. So I definitely call Wires for that, or if a local vet's nearby that could potentially. There are some good reptile vets. So, but the best thing is to go to for Wires or whatever. To take it to the local vet, or they'll take it directly to a reptile vet. There's some really good vets that are actually using things like fiberglass technology to, repair shells and that sort of thing too. So definitely call Wires and they'll come and help.
Well, it's just past 10 past. So final words, Ricky.
Look, could probably gone on for another hour or two. Yeah, but really, I wish I left it up for more questions. I'm so sorry about that. But here's the thing: is that there's if you go to 1millionturtles.com, we've got things like events and more workshops for the next few weeks, and they're all online at this stage. So don't worry about there'll be ones that'll be for different regions. Come along to them. You can come along, sign up for them and come along. We do have our national launch on 1st of November. It's 6:30 p.m. So please sign up for that. That would be great. We've got some guest speakers coming along.
We can circulate that link too, because we're being invited to that. So happy to circulate that to everyone that was here. Yeah.
I'll just stop sharing.
If you don't mind.
Yes, please, absolutely. So, and the other thing is just if you get involved, think about turtles, and if you haven't seen turtles, use TurtleSat to help. But to a large extent, if you've got some fresh water and kind of an urban park, those sort of things, go for a walk and you'll see them. Go for a walk, particularly after it rains, and there might be a bit of a storm coming over the next few weeks. You'll probably see them out nesting or around. So just watch out for them. And any sighting is a good sighting, and please record them into TurtleSat.
Also, like for the Parramatta River Catchment Group, we'd kind of like to know if you see a nest, where those nests are, so that like in the future or next season, we can make sure they're protected. Because the turtles, they do come back to the same place to nest. That's right, Ricky, isn't it?
Yeah, nesting spot. That's right. So even a dug up nest is actually really valuable information for us. Sad, but you know what? It shows it's a nesting ground. So we can start doing things about that.
Exactly.
It's really important to, if you find eggshells on the ground and you're not sure, don't record it. Take a photo. We can, that's what the photo will be. We can identify whether you find a hole on the ground that kind of looks, like a boot shape or those kind of things. Record it. We can, and take a photo. We can identify it for you if it is. So we want you to, and that's the thing. We can help you with that, and you'll start learning. You'll start working out where the turtles are nesting and where they're basking and where they're being hit on roads. And the beauty of TurtleSat is that you can look at your data, you can look at your historical data yourself, and you over 5 or 10 years, you can actually, wow, I've now recorded 7 or 8 turtles that have over those years that have been killed on the same road or something like that, and that's actually it's not just a one-off now, and you forget what happened a year before, that sort of thing. You'll actually start seeing your own data.
And Jeffrey, you've got a question.
Yeah, very quick one. You've referred a couple of times to eggshells. Are they actually more rubbery or leathery sort of thing, or are they more like a bird shell?
Yeah, so no, the sea turtle ones are the rubbery ones, and that's probably what we think about it. But the freshwater turtle ones are more like the eggshell, but they're probably not quite as thick as a crust in terms of the shell. But they'll crack. They crack open. Often, what you see in the old shell that's there in an old nest is actually not the shell itself. You're seeing the inside membrane. So eggs are full of membrane. They'll just dry up and be white as well, but they'll look like the actually out egg too.
Will they be soft and kind of cellophane-like, or?
No, not really. Once they dry, they can crumple a bit. But an egg, if you saw an egg that was eaten by, and the thing is, an egg eaten by a fox, they don't actually swallow them. They just chew them and crunch them and puncture holes and then kind of lick the contents. And so fresh one, you'll pick up an eggshell and it will be a little bit more rubbery than what a chicken egg is, but certainly it's hard shell. It is a hard shell, not a soft leathery shell.
Thank you.
Okay, and Jennifer, is that something that you wanted to say? She's put some things in the chat. So I think, much as it's very interesting and there's much more to say, I might have to bring it to a close. And thank you very much, Ricky. It's been amazing. It's been really, really informative. Lots of clapping going on. And we very much appreciate you coming and telling us about this. And I think there was some people inspired in Toongabbie Creek who are...
Toongabbie Creek's a great creek is a great place for it. So yeah.
Yes.
Yay!
Yay!
Thanks, Ricky.
So what we
thanks everybody.
Yeah. So thank you. And there's a few more Riverfest events. There's Toongabbie Treasures on Saturday. There's a climate action seminar tomorrow, and litter prevention on Monday, which is also one of the things that's important for all our wildlife. We hope to see you at something at Riverfest and Turtles in November. Thank you.